Hello and welcome to Mostly Vintage Cameras. This is the second video in two I've made. The first one called Understanding Depth of Field, and in this video we're going to take a look at a very useful function found on many lenses, which is a depth of field scale, and we're going to see how we can use this to maximise the depth of field in our photographs. So I quite like this Master V35 camera because the depth of field scale is very clear. It's very easy to indicate what's going on. Now on the top plate, or on top of the lens, we have an aperture adjuster or an aperture scale, and then on the front we have our focus indicator, so that's focused at 25 feet currently. Now normally when you take a photograph you establish your subject distance. Let's say it's 10 meters away. You focus the lens at 10 meters and everything's fine and dandy. But let's say we're taking a landscape and we're focused at or very near to infinity, and let's, for the sake of argument, say we're using the F28 Aperture for some reason. Now as we can see, what's in the far distance will be sharp. We're focused at infinity. And if we look on this side of the scale to 2.8, which is the aperture we're shooting at, we can see that this amount of distance is going to be sharp behind our plane of focus. But what about the other side? We've got a 2.8 here. This is what's sharp beyond infinity, and of course that makes no sense. There is nothing beyond infinity, so we're actually wasting that much depth of field. So what we can do is simply move our infinity focus marker to the 2.8 marker here, and now we've gained this amount of depth of field plus that we already had compared to when we focused actually on our subject in the distance. Now it's quite counterintuitive to not put our main subject on the plane of focus. But because we have this band of depth of field, an area in front of and behind the plane of focus that's acceptably sharp, we can utilize that to maximize the depth of field. Now if we were to stop our lens down to a more realistic, let's say f8 for the sake of argument, we can move our infinity marker around to f8, just about there. I don't know how clear that is on the video, but hopefully you'll be able to see it. And what we can see now is that everything from infinity through our plane of focus all the way down to approximately 14 feet will be sharp. And what we've done, quite by accident, is set the hyperfocal distance. Now you may have heard people refer to this mysterious hyperfocal distance, but for any camera, lens and aperture combination, it's the focus distance or focus plane you would need to set to get an acceptable level of sharpness from infinity down to the nearest possible area of sharpness you can have and still have infinity sharp. Now the nearest distance you'll get and still have infinity focus is actually half of the plane of focus. So as you can see, we're just slightly ahead of 25 feet here, and the f8 marker on our depth of field scale is showing 14 feet. So 14, that's 25, so a little bit past there is about 28. So that's half of that, so I can get all the way from 14 feet to infinity acceptably sharp. And that's all you need to know. That's all you need to do to get the hyperfocal distance. You don't need to do any arithmetic. You don't need to look up a lookup chart. That does of course depend on having a depth of field scale on your lens. If you don't have one, then you can find the hyperfocal distance for your given camera, lens and aperture combination. There's any number of lookup charts and even smartphone apps where you can plumb in your information for your camera equipment and it will give you the numbers. So if we go further, if we take infinity focus all the way to the minimum aperture of f16, this is really the most depth of field we can get. Now our focus plane is now 14 feet, and if we look at our depth of field marker, not every distance is engraved on this, but as we can see, we've got 6 feet here, we've got 9 feet here, so we're somewhere between 6 and 9 feet, which is going to be about 7 foot. Oh look, it's half the focus distance. So that's the hyperfocal distance and how to maximise our depth of field. But there's another way we can use the depth of field scale to help us take high day and holiday family, let's say, snapshots. So f16 is a bit unrealistic. Let's say it's a medium speed film we're using on an average kind of a light day, and we're going to be using a shutter speed and aperture combination in the region of a 60th at f8. Well, we've already set f8, so we've got f8 here, so I'm not too fussed about what's happening at infinity in actual fact. So let's see what else we can do here. If I set 6 feet up against the f8 marker on the depth of field scale, that's about 2 meters. And I look over here, I'm going to get something a little bit over 9 feet. Let's call it, I don't know, 10, 11 foot. Maybe a little bit more in actual fact. So now I've got what you might call a snapshot zone of focus. Most things that are going to interest me are going to happen between 2 meters and 3 or 4 meters, let's say. So things like children playing in the park. A car might take my interest, and so I'll take a quick snapshot of it. If I feel that my sort of general snapshotting activity is going to be further away, of course, at 14 feet at f8, I've now got more or less 10 feet to, let's say, 30 feet. So from there to there. I hope that's clear. So anything between about 10 feet here and about 30 feet here should be acceptably sharp, so I can just go ahead and take the photograph without having to worry too much. So that's how you select your hyperfocal distance and maximise your depth of field, and that's also how you can use a depth of field table like this to get a zone of focus suitable for something that you might think is going to be of interest to you. Now this is a slightly unusual camera. I've chosen it because the depth of field scale is right on the front, but let's take a look at a couple of other cameras and see how they compare. So here's a very blurry Minox, there we go. So I can still change my aperture here. Now this has aperture priority exposure, so as I choose an aperture it will choose a complementary shutter speed. I have to set my focus on the focus scale, which is set just here. At the moment we're at infinity. So I've got f5.6. Instead of focusing at infinity, if I move that around to the 5.6 marker on the depth of field scale, I can now shoot from maybe 15 feet to infinity and get acceptable sharpness. If it's a sunny day and I can go to f8, then obviously I can move that around a little bit further. Or if it's a very sunny day, I can go to f11, line up my infinity focus, and I've now got from about 7 feet to infinity as acceptably sharp. And again, what we've done is we have effectively set the hyperfocal distance more or less by accident without even thinking about it. On a single lens reflex camera, let's take a look at this guy. This is a Pentax SP500, classic camera, very popular of course, and we've got exactly the same thing. The aperture ring is bigger, the focus ring is bigger, but it's still the same scale. and it's marked F4, 8, there's a little marker for 11 and 16. So if I'm shooting at F8, I can maximise my depth of field. Instead of focusing on infinity for a landscape, I can move it around to F8, and then I've got everything from maybe 7 meters to infinity, or 20 feet to infinity. And again, if I want to concentrate on a particular area, I can line, let's say, 10 meters up with F8 on this side, and on this side I've got let's say 4 meters to 10 meters as an acceptable zone of focus. And I can change the zone. I can maximize the focus for near subjects or far subjects. As you get nearer, as we saw in the first video, focusing closer to the camera reduces the amount of depth of field. And you'll notice on all of these, the scale here is linear. The distances from there to there and there to there are all the same, but the distance is, that's 50 centimeters. But then when we go to a further distance, approximately half of that becomes 5 meters. So that is 5 meters of difference from 5 meters. Whereas at this end, all of that, about twice the actual rotation, is only 50 centimeters, or a tenth of what it is if we were focusing further away. So anyway, that's how to use a depth of field scale, either to maximize your depth of field, achieve the hyperfocal distance, or set a focus zone of your choosing that your subjects are likely to fall into. I hope that's been of use to somebody. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, I do appreciate it, and do have a good day.